Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is your Human Anatomy and Physiology teacher, Mr. Poser. Today, we are continuing our introductory unit to Anatomy and Physiology, the introduction to the human body, by talking about how we are able to maintain life, or how living things are able to stay alive, or even be considered alive. So, two main things that we're going to talk about today. There are 7 life functions, 7 things that living things need to be able to do in order to be alive, or to be considered or classified as alive. And the other thing that we're going to talk about are the 5 survival needs. What are the 5 main things that organisms need in order to do the 7 things that they have to do to stay alive? All right, so that's what is going to be the main topic of today. As I just mentioned, like all complex animals, humans must maintain a core set of necessary life functions to survive. And there are, as I said, there are 7 of them. So if you want to, you should pause the video and try to figure out what are the 7 things that every living thing must do in order to be considered alive or to even stay alive. All right? Pause the video. Try it yourself. Okay, did you try it? I hope you did. Otherwise, that'd be awkward. Here's the 7 things, or at least one word representing each of the 7 life functions. One says cellular, metabolism, growth, response, excretion, homeostasis, and reproduction. Okay, and these single word definitions don't really do much for us, so let's see what exactly it is we're talking about. All right, so in order to be alive, life must A, be made of cells, and that's what that cellular meant in that diagram. So all living things are at least made up of one cell. You are made up of about trillions of cells. So it's a really central tenet of being alive is you have to be at least one cell in order to be a living thing. So it's not really something that you have to do. It's just something that you have to be in order to be alive. At the end of this, I'm going to talk about viruses a little bit because there's some debate in the scientific community on whether or not viruses should be classified as living things. And I'll talk about that in just a second. The second thing is that they need to be able to take in nutrients and use energy and make their own cellular energy in the form of ATP. They need to be able to do metabolism. We talked about metabolism in our last unit, catabolism and anabolism. And in order to be alive, or in order to stay alive, living things must have a metabolism. They must be able to metabolize. That means break down certain molecules through catabolism and build up other molecules through anabolism. Third thing is that they need to be able to grow. So they need to be able to produce their own proteins, their own lipids, carbohydrates, all that stuff. They need to be able to grow. Multicellular organisms, their cells need to be able to divide and replace old or dying cells, and that's growth. Fourth is that they need to be able to respond to environmental stimuli. All right, so if something happens, something changes in an organism's environment, it needs to be able to respond to it in such a way that keeps it alive. So that's called response, and that's another thing that living things have to be able to do. Let's keep going. There's 3 more things that living things need to be able to do, or life functions. One is get rid of its waste. So along with metabolism, there is always waste. We produce waste in the form of carbon dioxide and a couple other things that we convert our nutrients into, or we get rid of what we don't need, because if we kept that around, who knows what could happen, but it would be a really, really bad thing. And it's a bad thing for any organism. They need to get rid of their waste, and that process is called excretion. Isn't that a nice word? Excretion? Just kidding. That's not a nice word. Anyway, so that's another thing. Excretion, it needs to maintain its own internal environment. It needs to maintain what's called homeostasis. This is a big one. In fact, our next video is going to be all about homeostasis and what that is and how we are able to maintain it through something called a negative or positive feedback loop. That sounds kind of crazy, but yeah, that's what it is. So homeostasis refers to an internal environment. Your internal environment, meaning what's inside of you, should be stable. It should have a set point at what it should be at. Like, say, for your body temperature, for example, it should be right around 97 to 99 degrees Fahrenheit. And your body works really, really hard to maintain that temperature, and that's part of homeostasis. And it keeps that internal temperature going despite the outside temperature changing. All right, so that's maintaining homeostasis. And finally, in order to be considered a living thing or to well, yeah, in order to be considered a living thing, you need to be able to make new life and pass down genes. So you need to be able to reproduce, because that's really the ultimate goal of all living things, is to pass down their genes to another generation, to continue their passing down their genetic information, their DNA. All right, so viruses. Let's talk about those for 1 second. Viruses are not considered to be alive by some scientists, but are considered to be alive by others. So I want to know what you think. Viruses, for example, are not necessarily made of cells. They're not cells. They don't have membranes. They don't have organelles. All it is a protein with a little protein capsule with a little RNA inside of it, or DNA inside of it. They're not able to metabolize. They're not necessarily able to grow. They can respond to an environmental stimulus. They can't get rid of waste. They do maintain their own internal environment. And we all know that they can reproduce from, what's going on in the world today. We all know that viruses can reproduce and pass down traits or pass down genes. So it's up to you to decide. Well, I don't know if it's up to you necessarily, but it is up for debate in the scientific community. They can do some of the 7 life functions, but they can't do all of them. So are they a living thing, or are they not a living thing? Who knows? All right, let's keep going. There are 5 survival needs. There are 5 important components that every living thing needs in order to serve out its life functions and be able to maintain its own life. If you want to try it, I suggest that you do. There are five things that a living thing needs in order to survive, in order to carry out its life function. So pause the video and see if you can't figure it out for yourself. Did you pause it? Okay, I hope you paused it. Let's review. What are our 5 main survival needs? Ooh, I didn't mean to move that. Here they are. I'm going to pull them out from behind this box. Ready? A normal body temperature. Body temperature needs to be maintained. We're going to talk about why in a minute. Water, you may have gotten that one. Everybody usually seems to guess water, which is correct. It needs oxygen. Every living thing needs oxygen. You may have gotten that one as well. I'm going to move my face up here. See, nutrients or food. Okay, if you got that one, great too. But I don't think anybody might have gotten this one, and that is atmospheric pressure. That's right. We as human beings, we depend on a certain amount of air pressure pushing down on our diaphragm and pushing down on us at any given time. So, yeah, nutrients, water, oxygen, normal body temperature, and atmospheric pressure. And I have these listed out right here. So nutrients, as I put, are needed for energy and cell building. So yeah, again, you are what you eat. Whatever you put in your body, whatever you get as nutrients is eventually what makes up your cells. Proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, all that stuff. Oxygen is necessary for metabolic reactions. So that's not true for all living things. Some living things can go without oxygen, but oxygen is really, really helpful for us. We can't go without oxygen. We can go for days without food, or like I think weeks without food. We can go a couple days without water, but we can't go a few minutes without oxygen. And the reason for that is that it's necessarily for metabolic reactions, more specifically cellular respiration, another topic that we discussed in our last unit. Water provides a necessary environment for chemical reactions. Water does a lot more than just that. Water is really, really important for maintaining that osmotic balance, which is something that we talked about in the last unit as well. Okay, we can't have too much, can't have too little. We have to maintain the amount of water that's going in and out of our cells. And yeah, water is a really good solvent. It's really good for dissolving everything. And it's polar. It sticks together and is really, really helpful for all of our cells and for all living things. It's all dependent on water. Normal body temperature is another survival need of ours. It's necessary for chemical reactions to occur. Okay? If our body temperatures are too high, they can't function. If they're too low, then none of the chemical reactions that make up our metabolism can function at the same rate. But if it's too high, then some of those chemical reactions might not work either. Yeah. So then 5 is atmospheric pressure. These kind of surprised that you might not have known before, but it's required for proper breathing and gas exchange. So your lungs, your respiratory system is highly, highly dependent on atmospheric pressure. And really all you're doing in by breathing in is changing the amount of pressure that's in your chest cavity, so that air automatically just kind of rushes in, goes from a high pressure to low pressure. And when you breathe out, you create a higher pressure in your chest cavity than there is outside, so air rushes from high pressure to low pressure. All right, so those are your 7 life functions and 5 survival needs. And that'll be it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions. We'll see you next time.